Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. We're going to get right on into it. All right, yeah, Connor Stalions' clause has been added basically to Sherrone Moore's contract, and he has signed. So he's got a 5-year deal with Michigan. We're going to talk all about that. Also, the VOLS have added a talent fee to their tickets. And don't be surprised if you see a lot of teams doing exactly that coming up. Tennessee has a tendency to kind of be a trendsetter when it comes to NIL and how to deal with the revenue issues that are coming down the path, and they're coming quickly. But anyway, let's get into Sherrone Moore and his new contract and this special, we'll call it a clause. This is in Football Scoop. It says Sherrone Moore's contract has a Connor Stalions clause. Michigan cannot fire Moore for cause for NCAA violations it was aware of before offering him the contract, documents show. And there was a big to-do because he was supposed to sign back in January with the date of April as sort of a date that they needed to get it done, and he hadn't signed. And the thought process was Michigan was holding off because they didn't know what was going to happen with this Connor Stalions investigation, NCAA, and they wanted an out just in case if it turned out that Moore had been obviously conspiring or something like that, allegedly, with Connor Stalions since he had deleted like 50 some odd texts. Now, it's probably doubtful that that was the case because my understanding is he wants people to see the text. But Michigan was like, they're just doing their due diligence of, hey, do we want to owe this person a ton of money if we don't have to? So attorneys are smart like that. They're going to say, hey, you might want a little exit ramp here just in case this blows up in your face. And Michigan's like, yeah, we should do that. Then it came out about a few weeks ago that he hadn't signed the contract. And, of course, the pressure was just mounting on Michigan that they had to get him signed. Otherwise, it would just everything in the world would just come down on him. As far as recruiting and things like that, players would be like, well, is Moore even going to be there long term? So they wound up cutting the deal. And I will go into the numbers. And the contract says, the clause notwithstanding the foregoing, a violation of governing rules which occurred prior to the effective date to the extent university had actual knowledge of the facts or alleged facts, which is an important clause right there, alleged facts, that are the basis for the violation prior to the execution of this agreement by all parties shall not be deemed a basis for termination with cause. He says in English, this means Michigan cannot fire Moore for cause for violations involving Moore that it was aware of prior to beginning of the contract, which was January 27th of 2024. And Moore is one of 7 coaches that's tied up in this notice of allegations that the NCAA provided to the Wolverines. He faces a show cause penalty and possible suspension for deleting over 50 texts to Stalions. It says when the scouting scandal broke, the texts were later discovered and Moore provided them to the NCAA enforcement staff. If found guilty, it would be a second violation for Moore. He served a 1-game suspension to open the 23 season for violating the NCAA recruiting rules during the pandemic dead period. Now the deal is 5 years, $6 million a year, so $30 million bucks. So they're not, they're not on the hook for some crazy amount of money like the Jimbo Fisher deal. I mean, a $30 million head coaching deal over 5 years, that's not too bad. I can go ahead and tell you the Florida Gators would love to have that contract they're dealing with Billy Napier. They're going to have to pay him $26 million bucks, and he's been there 3 years. Whereas Moore at $6 million a year, that's much more manageable, especially for a big college like Michigan. We're going to get into the buyout of this and kind of give you an idea what would happen worst case scenario, which probably won't happen, but let's take a look at it anyway. All right, the financial terms of it. This deal runs through January 31st of 2029. It's $6 million. That includes the annual $500,000 retention payment. There is a 2% annual increase each year. If Michigan were to fire Moore without cause, the school would owe him an amount equal to 75% of the base salary and additional compensation. So take that into consideration. If they did it right now, they'd owe him $19 million bucks. Now, obviously, they're not going to fire him right away if they did at all. And he may work out. Look, he was the obvious choice to bring in as coach because it kept continuity. He's very popular with the players. They wanted to retain as much of their talent as they possibly could, even though a lot of it went to the NFL, along with their head coach and their defensive coordinator and so on and so forth. Yeah, old Jim Harbaugh, he escaped or ran away.
Brave Sir Robin ran away. No! Bravely ran away.
I did
Anyway, the folks that are left, you wanted to keep that together as much as you could. And again, Moore being the offensive coordinator was the obvious choice. And like I said, it's not like they're investing a ton of money in him compared to other coaches. And the reality is it's not like he came in as a head coach somewhere and had a ton of winning behind him where he could, demand some crazy amount of money like some coaches.
Lane Kiffin, for example.
Florida, you're going to have to pay through the nose to have any chance to get him. Woo! He's going to want a lot. You may have to cut off part of Florida and give it to him. So let's say he struggles this year and struggles next year, and they let him go. They're going to owe him like $10 million. That is paltry compared to a lot of folks. It really is. Jimbo Fisher was $76 million. Again, Billy Napier is going to be $26 million. So worst case scenario, you'd owe the guy $10 million, which is a ton of money in reality for us regular folks. But when it comes to head coaches, that's probably about average, honestly. Might be below average. Certainly would be for the SEC. So anyway, that's what's going on there. And, of course, we're waiting to see if there's any connection between Connor Stalions and South Carolina's magical 2 victories over Tennessee and Clemson in 2022 that knocked both of them out of the playoff.
How dare you!
And I've shown you all that circumstantial evidence. And, of course, it was footballscoop.com that said a person with direct knowledge said that Connor may very well have reached out to a team that could have disrupted the path of a college football playoff team, which would have been obviously the Vols and or Clemson. So that's not been proven yet. That's still hypothetical. But anyway, we're still waiting to see if there's any news on that at all. We know that South Carolina's recruiting director, the head of it, suddenly resigned and or was fired. And their athletic director suddenly resigned the day before ESPN Game Day showed up for that LSU game. All of this has happened in the last few days, and it's kind of shocking, honestly. Whether it's tied to this or not, we don't know. But man, oh man, all this is just kind of swirling around. And as I've said, there's a lot of smoke. Obviously, there was a ton of smoke. I mean, it blew up at Michigan. But there's a lot of smoke in South Carolina. And when your athletic director resigns suddenly and your recruiting director, that screams problems. So anyway, we'll be keeping tabs on that, and we'll find out if there's any connection about this or not.
Possibly.
Anyway, let's also talk today about the Vols adding a 10% talent fee to their tickets. And here it's been discussed on CBS Sports, a 10% addition, and that's to cover revenue sharing with the players, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. They're calling it a groundbreaking talent fee is what Danny White is doing. It'll add a 10% premium charge to tickets that will go directly to athletes in 2025. Now, why is this necessary? Because there's a settlement that's going on between the NCAA and multiple class action lawsuits, which we've covered on this channel a bunch. And those are House, Hubbard, and Carter. And all 3 of those are lawsuits that are trying to get billions of dollars from the NCAA. And because the Supreme Court has already hammered the crap out of the NCAA over not paying the athletes, or not compensating them, they know they would lose. And if they did, it would totally shut down the NCAA. So they're like, hey, we've got to come up with some sort of settlement. So they've done that, but it's all still getting worked out, the details. Now, rather than tell you what the settlement is and explain it to you, I actually put it in a chart because I know y'all like the charts. So let's take a look at it. All right, so the settlement breakdown, revenue sharing of $17 to $22 million, or let's just call it $20 million a year, at most major universities. So, for example, the Tennessee Vols, they'll be paying out $20 million in revenue sharing to all the athletes. Then there's like a $2 million for damages each year. That's for a back pay for some of the athletes that were damaged prior to the settlement. And then there's additional scholarships. For example, football teams can have up to 105 scholarships instead of 85. So you'll see the term $30 million, which is pretty much what Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, all of those teams that are really at the top level that are going to go ahead and fully compensate the amount that's settled will have to come up with every year. And the best way to do that, I think Danny White's dead on with this, is just call it a talent fee. Call it what it is. Don't increase the price and say, oh, we're just increasing the ticket price. No, this is exactly what it's going for. And now not all of that is going to be enough to cover the $30 million. They're going to have to raise revenue in other ways. That's why I keep telling you, I think you're going to see more college football games added over time. Obviously, the 12-team playoff is huge. That's going to bring in tons of money to the colleges. And actually, speaking of charts, I'll show you that. Yeah, right here, for example, the SEC, $23 million per team will be added for college football playoff money distribution. Big Ten will get $21 million. ACC and Big 12, you see right there, 13 and 12. So that'll obviously help quite a bit. You'll also see several athletic departments are cutting back staff. I believe Texas A&M let 16 people go a few months ago in preparation of this, because when you add $30 million on top of a budget and say, here's an additional $30 million expense, they're already spending every dollar. So you're going to have to cut some expenses. You're going to have to drive revenue, and a talent fee is a pretty good way to probably help with about a third of that. Here is Danny White speaking about this to Andy Staples on On3.
I got to admit, Danny, I don't know that I ever thought I'd see this day, but as you guys prepare for a revenue share with the college athletes, you guys are tacking a talent fee onto your ticket price and just saying to the fans, hey, this is going to the players. What gave you the idea to do it this way?
You know, we're excited about NIL and excited about this new era of rev share. I think it's great that student athletes are now starting to get resource that I think that they've deserved, and it's a great time for college sports as we march forward. I think that Tennessee is really well positioned in that space. We've been a leader in NIL. We're trying to lead in a lot of ways in college athletics, and as we talk about how we communicate with our fan base. From the very beginning, once I got here, we've talked about being transparent, communicate early and often with them. And so we knew that as we look at roster limits and scholarship limits going away, and certainly the new $22 million revenue share coming into the athletics department, we knew we need their help. And so how do we communicate that and make sure that we're generating as much revenue as we can off of our stadium, off of our arena? And at some point, there was a light bulb moment where somebody in our creative team just said, you know what, let's just be transparent with them and call it what it is. It's a talent fee, and it's going directly to the talent. It's going to our student athletes as part of this new world order in college sports. So I know our fans will embrace it. They've supported us every step along the way, and I expect the same will happen here.
And that's an excellent interview. If you want to see the entire thing, it's on YouTube. Anyway, I like Andy Staples. I think he does a good job. All right, so that's what the deal is. And I think you're going to see dozens of colleges do the exact same thing, because just literally call it what it is. This money will go to the student athletes. It's a talent fee. I'd rather pay that than I would just increasing the ticket price, because that's just going to tick you off. But if you know where the money's going and you see it on the field, it's like, okay, I'll pay an extra 10% for that. That makes sense. So anyway, that's part of how they're going to generate this $30 million that every big school is going to have to do. All right, so did want to cover these stories today. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button, because it lets me know to continue to cover all these big college stories. And if you've not subscribed, just hit this button. If you like this type of content, you want to get more of it, this makes it easy to get it. Boom, hit that little button. Won't cost you a dime. It's free. Now that's a deal, because that's a non-talent fee. Of course, I'm not that talented, but you get the point. And right over here is the most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy based on your viewing history. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.